if you are a writer yourself, think about the scripts, the movies that really touched you, that are in that genre that you're doing.
This episode is brought to you by Bulletproof Script Coverage, where screenwriters go to get their scripts read by top Hollywood professionals. Learn more at covermyscreenplay.com. I'd like to welcome to the show Kathie Fong Yoneda. How are you, Kathie?
I'm fine, thank you. How about you?
I'm doing good, as good as we can be in this crazy upside-down world that we live in today. But thank you for being on the show. I wanted to bring you on because I loved your book, The Script Selling Game, and it is, I think, a part of the screenwriting conversation with screenwriters that's not talked about enough. I try to yell about it at the top of my lungs from the mountain. To you need to understand the business side. You have to understand how the game is played. It's not all about plot and characters, and that it is all about that, but it also is about the business, like show business. There's two of them. You have to connect. So I wanted to bring you on the show and kind of dig into that. But before we get started, how did you get into the business?
It's about the only thing I owe to my ex-husband. My ex-husband worked for a famous director, Stanley Kramer, and I was just doing secretarial work, and he was telling me, well, if you're going to do secretarial work, you should work at the studios. They at least have a union. You get paid a little bit more. So I applied at Universal Studios, and surprisingly, I got in. And it's kind of an interesting fact is that this is many, many years ago. I mean, we're talking about 1969. Okay. I've been in the industry for a long time. And what happened is that I got put into what they call the secretarial pool. And I was just doing my work, and one of the gals in the secretarial pool came up to me, and she said, my friend was supposed to get that job. And I said, what? What do you mean? She said, the only reason you got it is because you're Asian. And I thought, well, that's kind of a crazy thing for her to say, but I just looked at her and I just said, well, I don't know. All I know is I got the job. I went down to the to the personnel office, and I asked the gal, I said, well, what is this all about? And she said, well, it's true. We were looking for it specifically somebody who was of another ethnicity, because the industry is liable to get sued by the United States government, because we had less than 0.1% of our workforce is minority. So everything else is white. And so it was a big wake-up call for that industry. And she said, but we didn't hire you just because of that. We hired you because you were the best candidate. You actually typed faster. You gave a great, little, talk about who you are and sort of what you were interested in, and that's why we hired you. And so I kind of just worked my way up the ranks in the secretarial pool, and eventually started working in the the executive office over at Warner Brothers. And that's where I met the man who became my mentor. His name was Richard Shepard. And I don't know, I don't know, a lot of people might not know him, but he was a producer. He was a top studio exec. He helped to form, I believe it was Creative Management Associates, which used to be a very famous agency. He went off on location for one of his films, and I was left at the office. And so all these scripts kept coming in, and I was getting bored, so I started reading them. And when he came back, he, started to read, picked up one of the scripts, started to read it, and I said, oh, you don't need to read that one. He goes, well, why not? And I said, it's not very good. And so he picked up another one. I said, that one's even worse. You don't need to read it. And he looked at me and he said, how many of these did you read? And I said, all of them. There were probably about 40 scripts. It was pretty boring when he was gone.
Right.
So he said, do me a favor. He said, could you just do a few lines telling me what it's about, and then do a paragraph on why you liked it or didn't like it. So I started doing that, and I found that it was just like doing book reports in a way.
Pretty much.
Only they had to do scripts. So that's how I got started. And he said, you are really good at this. You're able to sort of get the essence of the story, and you must watch a lot of movies because you're able to determine whether or not works. And so he was my mentor. And what he started to do was involve me in some of his productions. So I became a production secretary, and I actually was the first Asian female, not only at Universal, but at Fox now. I was the first, what they call production secretary, to ever get a credit. And the credit was on Robin and Marianne.
Wow.
And then my boss moved over to become president over at MGM before it eventually disintegrated. But while I was going over there, he said, well, the good thing is, guess what? You get to have your own secretary. You'll be the number one secretary. And I said, well, I'm not so sure about that. And he said, what do you mean? And so I did my first deal. What I did was I said, well, I'm happy to go over to MGM with you, and I'll set up the office, and I'll hire somebody to be the other secretary. But after a couple of months, after she's gotten used to everything, I would like to have the opportunity to spend 30 days in the story department as a story analyst. Because in those days, in order to become a member of that guild, you had to work for 30 straight days. Mm-hmm. And then you had to go through, I guess it's sort of, I don't know.
Like qualifications or something like that.
Yeah, it's a series of qualification things that you had to do. And so I did it, and I was one of the few that actually got in right away. On the first thing, I didn't have to take it over and over again. So I became a member of the Story Analyst Guild, and that's how I moved around from studio to.
So let me ask you, how many scripts have you read in your career?
I really should have counted them. When I started, I didn't really think about counting them, but
tens of thousands.
Yeah. I would say, because, listen, I've been reading scripts since about 1973.
Mm-hmm.
And I still was reading them when I became an executive over at Disney, and so and I was a VP over at Island Pictures, and I was still reading scripts as part of my job. And I'm still reading scripts now because I'm helping a lot of the new writers out there to sort of get started. So I'm a consultant now.
So what should writers do in the development process that can give their story a fighting chance?
Well, I think I should say something like, you could read my book. That would be a good start.
We're always going to begin every answer to every question. You should read my book. That being said, what else could you say here?
Well, it first of all, if you are a writer yourself, think about the scripts, the movies that really touched you, that are in that genre that you're doing, and get a hold of that script. You can usually go, there's scripts.com and a couple of other places that you can get copies of scripts. And look at more movies in that arena and see what were the scenes, the key scenes that were able to give you a good sense of the characters, their motivation. What is it that made that movie work? All those are the things that you need to work on to make sure that your movie in that particular genre has all of those different qualities to it. I really, I love working with writers, especially the newbie writers, because they have there's still something about them where there's that originality. Mm-hmm. And I think they haven't been
beaten up,
exposed too much. They haven't been exposed too much to some of the realities that we face in the industry, it does become rather tough. I mean, when you become a paid screenwriter, yes, you will do a lot of writing and everything, but you also have a lot of other disappointments, and there's always knowing that there are other writers out there that are before you and behind you. It's one of those things. And moods change and genres change on what's popular. You've got to kind of keep up with that. But what's nice now is that there's streaming and there's web series and there's lots of other ways that I think writers can actually express themselves. I used to be on the board of the LA Web Fest many years ago. I think it was started back in 2009 or so. Mm-hmm. And it was just amazing because the idea of taking something and winnowing it down to just watching 3 or 4 minutes of it and having people come back the next week to watch the next chapter, the next chapter, the next chapter. It gave me such a wonderful way of saying, of being able to tell other writers, start off small. If you're unsure, start off small and go big. Probably one of the best success stories is, there were a couple of people who had wonderful web series, which eventually, turned into, people started looking at those web series and realized that these people had a lot of talent and they were hired. So that's one of the things that happened. And I think web series is another way of doing it, is especially if you want to break into television, mm-hmm. you get used to being able to tell things succinctly. And you really have to develop those characters right away. And so I always tell people, if you have a television series idea, start off small. Start by doing something like a web series.
And I mean, the world is changing so rapidly. And I mean, I can only imagine since 1973 how the world has changed in the film industry, how movies have changed, how everything has changed so dramatically. There is more than ever need for content because there's so many outlets out right now, and there's so many streaming services, and features in a lot of ways are not leading the pack anymore. It's more scripted television, and that's where a lot of these independent voices are going. And that's, to be honest, is where a lot of the money is made. I mean, unless you're at the upper echelon in the studio system, you're doing Marvel movies or tentpole movies, and that's a different conversation. But generally speaking, television is where a writer can actually start making a living. Even a low budget streaming series, you'll be able to make some money as a writer. Which, if you're making any money as a writer, you're winning.
Oh yes.
But the one thing I again, when I said at the beginning of the show, is a lot of screenwriters just don't even think about the politics, the business side. What can screenwriters do to prepare themselves better for the business of screenwriting? We know that it's kind of like film school. Film school beats you up about the process of making a movie, but they don't teach you how to sell the movie. They don't teach you how to get a job in the industry. They don't teach you how to make any money. All they do is teach you the art. And the same thing goes with screenwriting. A lot of times, there's 1,000 books out there and 1,000 courses about how to write a screenplay. Very few about the business side of like how to actually make a living, how to sell your script. What can they do to better prepare themselves for the business side?
Well, I think that what's difficult for a lot of writers is they would rather just have the words on paper do the talking for them. Mm-hmm. Learning how to pitch is really one of the more difficult things to get people to do. And it's being able to sort of boil down the heart of your story to let people know what your project is all about. And sometimes, people are so used to being able to say, well, and this scene, this happens, and then this, it's sort of like they start telling you the whole story, but they're not selling it. It's just like to whoever's listening to it, it's just a lot of words. You need to be able to very succinctly tell your story. And so pitching is one of those things that I found it just is one of those things you got to develop that as one of your talents. It can't be just handing somebody your script or your book. You have to be able to pitch it. And in doing that, you can put in your own personality. And I think that's important, because a lot of it is when you're talking with somebody, they may have a wonderful story that they're pitching to you, but if they don't have the same kind of if they don't have a kind of personality that you feel you can work with, that can sometimes blow the deal. Mm-hmm. So this is where it's also, you have to pitch to everybody. You know, whether it's a studio exec, somebody in production, even if it's somebody you happen to meet at a party who works in the industry, and they ask you, "Oh, what do you do?" "Oh, well, I wrote a screenplay." "Oh, tell me what it's about." Now, the other thing that's helpful is if you belong to a writers group, mm-hmm. and there's so many online writers groups nowadays, and there are places like Stage 32 and a couple of other mm-hmm. places that a lot of people are very much aware of it. Those kinds of groups are very, very helpful. You can find people who are going through the same thing you're doing. And that's what I like about this business now. Before, it used to be so competitive that nobody would tell anybody anything because they were afraid somebody else would get ahead. Nowadays, people seem to be willing to help one another. And in doing so, I've noticed that I do a lot of retreats. Mm-hmm. So I have to work with a lot of writers in a large group. And the idea of working that way, working together, or working side by side with somebody and seeing what they're doing, how they're developing their material, and they can see how you're developing your material. And you guys are able to exchange ideas and give some advice to one another. It builds up a friendship. Not only that, but if one person makes it, they're going to, if they hear about, oh, there's another job up and we need somebody else on staff, their friends are going to probably be the next one. They're going to be getting that phone call or email saying, hey, guess what? We need somebody else on staff. So those kinds of things that, they used to have more conferences. Now there's a lot more online ones now. And I think that helps. The small group online ones are kind of what's going on now, because they used to have the ones where you would go to a hotel center or something and you would have it. And I used to be a member of a lot of those. I taught at a lot of them, but it was great because, you were able to sometimes meet agents and producers and all that, but you were doing it with hundreds of other people. Mm-hmm. This way, at least online, you can start making your own contacts more directly. So I do think that, joining some of those groups is really a step forward.
Can you please tell the audience how important it is to build relationships in this business? That this business is so relationship based. I've said it on the show a bunch of times, and I will continue to say it because I want to hammer it into them that if you don't, you could be the next Sorkin mixed with Tarantino's love child. I mean, you could be the next best writer ever. And if you don't understand how to get to somebody, or at least build relationships to open those doors, you're going to be standing in the sidelines. Because I've even read, I haven't read nearly as many scripts as you, but even I've read scripts that I'm like, how is this not produced? This is an Oscar-winning story. This is well written by a really big writer, and it's not getting produced. So if these guys who have credits, who have relationships, who have amazing content, can't get their stuff done, what is the chance of a newbie writer having it? So to at least stack the chips, relationships, would you agree?
Well, I actually think now is actually a very good time for those of us who maybe don't have as many credits or who are just getting into the business, because there are a lot of companies that will no longer exist after this COVID experience.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's a lot of people then who are now branching off with people they've worked with to form smaller production companies or smaller entities, and that includes even agencies. There's still a lot. There's a lot of stuff going on. There is the Writers Guild, but then remember they did try to get rid of the Writers Guild, and that didn't work. And I think that people are realizing who your real friends are and who you can really work with and talk to during this pandemic. And I think that's what's going to help people to form some of the relationships that they need. And it's interesting, a lot of the people form things through film school. And I can't stress enough that even if you are not in college or in a film program at a university or something, talk to some of your friends. Do you have a friend that knows someone who does camera work, or somebody else who, look at other people outside of writers, because the more information that you have about the process of getting a movie or a television series made really can help you with your writing and with your relationship building.
Do you recommend that writers team up with directors and producers at a small level to create a web series, let's say, that's low budget, so they can have something produced that they can have actors acting their lines, and it kind of might set them apart a little bit when going into one of these pitch meetings? They're like, oh yeah, I've produced, my scripts have been produced 4 or 5 times on these series. You could just go to Amazon, or you can watch it, better yet, on Netflix if you can get it to that point. But even on Amazon or some other place, it kind of sets you apart a little bit, and it kind of puts the power a little bit more in the writer's hands, as opposed to just always looking for someone to give them the opportunity or open that door for them.
Well, to me, it also shows that you as an individual are not afraid to get out there, that you're so passionate about your work that you're willing to put yourself on the line. We cannot work, I don't think any of us can, if we just stand there and hold our hands out and expect somebody to shake it and say, yes, we're hiring you. You've got to prove that. And when they know that you've done this, if you've paired up with some other people that you are familiar with and that you guys get along and you do things well together, like in a web series, it really, I think, gives whoever you're talking to a stronger sense of who you are, and that you have the passion to move ahead, and that it doesn't. You're not going to let anything stop you. You certainly don't mind, working with other people, and that's the main thing. Is a lot of people have made the mistake of thinking that, okay, I've got this job and that's it, and I now have I've got something on my resume here, and they don't fail to keep up with their relationships with some of the people that they may have been working with. And this happens a lot with movies and television. The important thing is, if you are in a writer's room like you are on most television series, you form relationships very quickly. You are in that room sometimes for 12 to 15 hours a day, for 5-6 days in a row.
Oh yeah.
And you have to prove that you're a team player, and your personalities always have to come out, because you can't always hold back on something. If you believe in something, I mean, your personality comes through. And if you work with people who have similar personalities or similar points of view, when they move, if they get say one of their scripts is bought for a television series, you better believe they're going to think about, oh yeah, all these writers that I've worked with, that I got along with, they're going to hire those people. Mm-hmm. So building those kind of relationships are very, key. And starting off on a smaller level with web series is a perfect way to go.
Now, when you get into a room, let's say you finally get into this room that we keep hearing about, and you're in the room with this mogul, producer, agent, manager. What do you do in a pitch meeting? What are some tips that you can give a writer to be in a pitch meeting?
First of all, do your homework. So in other words, whoever you're meeting, find out a little bit more about them. You don't have to do a whole bio or something on it, but, just see if there's something, find out what they've done in the past, what helped them to get where they are now. Maybe a producer might have been a creative exec at an agency, or at a studio, or maybe someone might have even been a reader or a story analyst somewhere. You usually can find out, you go online, and if you Google that person's name, there's stuff bound to come up about what their background is like. Not, plus, you can go to, what is it? Some of the other websites. There's so many of them now out there. But go to some of those websites and check them out and see what was their background. You could have something in common like them. You could have gone to the same college, even though it was 10 years apart when they graduated. Or it could be that maybe they have sometimes you find out things like, oh yeah, and so is in this club. So maybe it's a literary club, or maybe it's flying airplanes club, or whatever. I mean, they have funny things that people will put in there about who people are and what do they do. And if you know someone else in the industry who happens to know them a little bit more, or have worked with them before, it doesn't hurt to just say, oh, so-and-so told me to say hi to you. I told them I was going to have a meeting, and they told me to say hi. That goes a long way, too.
It does.
You never know who might know someone. So if don't be afraid to just talk to your writers group, or to some, to whoever it is that you kind of hang out with, and just say, I've got a meeting with Mr. X, and do you know anybody who knows them, or whatever, and just to find out if they know a little bit more about it. There's you have to have a certain amount of sincerity about things, though, too.
Authenticity, right?
Yeah, I've been in meetings where people have you could tell when they're trying too hard, and they're not being that they're not really kind of sincere about what they're
I like to call it the stench of desperation. It's like it's a perfume that you wear. I wore it for many years, where if anybody came on set that even had a remote amount of power, you would just rush over to them and go, you'd be like that grip on set with the screenplay in his back pocket, like, hey, when you get a chance, do you mind reading my, like, it was just this kind of like energy sucking thing. Like, what can you do for me? How can you help me? As opposed to the opposite, which was what I discovered later in my career, is how can I be of service to you? How can I help you? And that's a much more authentic way to build a relationship. And then you start working together, but you've got to start by offering what you can do as opposed to sucking. Would you agree?
I'll agree. Very much agree. The other thing, too, is, nowadays, a lot of colleges now do have film schools as part of their curriculum. And that's one of the things that, if you can, even if it's just taking 2 or 3 classes and maybe not doing exactly a major in it, but if you can, that's great. But if your dad's paying for your college degree and he wants you to get it in something like applied science or
accounting, sure.
Yeah, you could still take a few screenwriting classes, because if you graduated from that particular school and had taken some of those things, it's very easy to sort of find out a lot about the other people out there, whether they're agents, execs, producers, actors even. And by the way, actors nowadays, they're getting a lot smarter. They're forming their own production company. As they should.
They should develop projects for themselves. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This whole concept of, and I think writers are going to start getting to that place. I don't know if they're there yet, but there are some that are doing it, where you as the creator in today's world, the old studio system where there's a gate and there's gatekeepers. If you want to play at the very high end, again, tentpoles, Marvel, Studio, Disney, these big giant corporations, you got to play that game. But you can still build something outside where those people or those outlets or many other outlets like Netflix, for God's sakes, or Hulu or these other companies will come looking for you if you build something else. So that's why actors, and I think with writers, can team up with production people and team up with actors. that's when it starts getting really interesting, as opposed to always waiting for the gatekeeper to open the gate and give you, crumbs to get in or something like that. It's because it's just a lot of people trying to get in. And that's what my personal journey was. I was trying to get into the party for the longest time. I snuck in a couple times, but the bouncers took me out later on. So I understood always trying to get into that Hollywood party until I finally decided to make my own party and started creating my own company and started developing my own projects. And then magically they start knocking on my door and asking me what I'm doing. And I was like, oh, so this is how you do it. Oh, okay, I get it. And then that desperation stench started to go away.
Well, I mean, you're self-reliant.
You have to be in today's world.
People like to invest in people who are self-reliant.
Mm-hmm. And that's something they don't teach you in school. They don't. That's like that one little comment is so powerful, because you're saying, if you are self-reliant, if you show that you can do it on your own, if you show that you can build, even at a small level, a web series, that you were able to produce a web series that has a good story, decent production value, which in today's world you could absolutely get for tens of thousands of dollars, because I've done it and I've seen other filmmakers do it. That shows a lot, as opposed to one of the 10th. How many times did you walk in a room during your career and just saw piles of scripts from the floor to the ceiling, just sitting there, that either you had to read or someone else was reading and you guys were just going through it? Am I exaggerating, or is it? I've seen the pictures.
No, it's, of course, nowadays it's
digital.
They're getting online, which is just as bad, because I actually think, and I've actually talked to a lot of people who are in the industry, and they say they actually kind of prefer having something you can put in your hand.
Yeah.
Instead of reading it off the computer, which, after about 2 hours of that, it kind of gets it's weary on the eyes, and sometimes you kind of forget everything. Mm-hmm. But so much of this industry is, I understand it's about who you know, but it's also who you can be and who you are. You've got to have some. I mean, I always tell this funny story. The guy who's on that television show, which is escaping my mind right now, but Randall, the one that does the thing about the Asians.
Randall. Fresh Off the Boat.
Yeah, Fresh Off the Boat.
Yeah.
Okay, because it's been off the air now for 2 seasons, but
yeah,
what he did, you probably have heard this story too, is that he was actually with a bunch of other of his friends, and they wanted to kind of, get into the industry as writers, directors, and actors and all this. So they started a web series. And you probably already know this story.
But a lot of people don't know, so please go ahead.
So IKEA is this Swedish company that has furniture, and they've got all those different floors of furniture and everything in it. And Randall and his friends wanted to do a little short film, which back in those days it was just called a short film. It wasn't called a web series, but that's what it was. It ended up being that. They would have to shoot certain scenes here or there, but they would web series usually only have 1 or 2 scenes in them anyway for each episode, because it's hard to find scenery that you can actually use. So if they didn't, they all were kind of like, a couple of them, in fact, I think were roommates, and so they were sharing a single apartment, and so they didn't have much to work with. So they lived in Burbank. Some of them lived in Burbank, and they went over to the IKEA store and started filming some things at the IKEA store. First it would be in the kitchen, then it would be in the living room area, then it would be in the bedroom area. And finally, the night manager, actually, the one who was there from about 3 o'clock in the afternoon until it closed at 10, kind of noticed all of this thing. What's going on? They aren't just taking pictures of the furniture. These guys are actually, taking movies. So he asked them what they were doing, and they explained, look, we're really sorry about this. It's just that he explained, we're trying to do a series so we can show people. And he says, you're going to do a TV series here? And he goes, well, no, we're putting it on the internet. And the guy was actually kind of
intrigued,
interested. He just thought, oh, okay, that's it. Well, he says, Well, actually, you know what? The best time to come then? Come after 7:30, because most people have gone home. They either pass by here on the way to work or during lunch. But after about 7:30 or so, it thins out. So come on over here. He actually let them do it. Now, he's no longer working there, so don't let anybody get the idea that you could still do this, because I don't want the IKEA manager calling me and saying, "What the heck did you tell people?"
What did you tell people? There's filmmakers everywhere trying to shoot now in IKEA. Well, not right now anyway because of COVID, but when it does come back out.
Well, Randall was an unknown at the time.
And Randall Park, Randall Park, the actor.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, and he's gone on to be big. He's huge now.
Yeah. And it's one of those stories, and it's the same thing. There's that gal Jane, who the Hispanic gal, who in her first series, she started off doing 3 web series, and one of the casting people was hooked on web series and noticed her, and that's what he did, is he called her in, and she's very famous and got her own. She not only had her own television series, but she now then ended up, I think she's now producing a film.
Yeah, you're talking about Gina Rodriguez from Jane the Virgin.
Yeah, Gina.
Funny enough, I actually worked on, I think, her first feature as I was the post-production guy, editor, colorist person on her first film, and she was a supporting cast member, and she stole the show, and I was like, wow, this girl's got something. And then a year or two later, she's like, oh, well, she's got her own TV show now. Oh, okay, she's exploded. Okay, that's how it works here in Hollywood. And
she's got an Emmy.
Yeah. Oh, she's an Emmy winner now. Oh, yeah. Okay. So this is how that works. Okay, great. It's funny, being here in LA. It's a web series.
A group of friends. Mm-hmm. They started with a group of friends saying, you know what, we got to do something to show that we are serious about being in this industry.
Yeah, and it's so important. You're absolutely right. It's so important to just kind of go out there and do it. And, like the IKEA story, sometimes you got to not break the rules, but just you live in the gray area. You live in the gray area a bit, and you got to do what you got to do. And as long as you're not doing anything illegal, just go for it and try to make it happen for yourself. But that says a lot more to me as a producer, as a filmmaker, about somebody that they've actually gone out and produced something on their own that has some quality to it than 1,000 scripts. In a lot of times, I don't know if you agree with this or not, but a lot of times it's the best stuff doesn't always get produced. It's not always the cream rises to the top. I mean, I'm sure you've read a ton of scripts that have never been produced that were Oscar worthy or should have Emmy worthy series that just didn't get produced for whatever politics, money falling apart, all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of times who hustles the hardest and who proves it to the right people and the politics involved. Is that a fair statement?
It's not a good statement, but it is a fair statement.
I agree with you. It's not a good statement, but it's a fair statement.
But you know what? It's sort of like that no matter what industry you go in.
Sure.
You have people that know other people and they get up there right away. And then you have people who are struggling, and even though they may be very talented, they just haven't found their voice and their community to be able to help move them ahead. And I think what's great is now with the internet, we're finding a lot more of these people. I do know that one of those things about the internet is people are very easy to talk to online, much more so than if you meet somebody in person for some reason. Maybe it's because they think that people judge you, by how you look or what your first appearance is or something. But once you start talking to people online, you get a real sense of someone's personality. And I have so many of my writers who have told me that they have met the most interesting people who are now people they are working with on projects, whether it's a director, an actor, or whatever. They are actually starting to work together and move ahead on projects because they found people that they can work with. And sometimes, back in the olden days, you just had to work with whoever was shoved your way, whether that person was someone that had a good personality or had a good sense of humor or whatever. You just had to work with whoever they told you to work with. It's still a little true today, but I find that I see groups of people, especially behind the scenes, people that like to move together to another project.
Mm-hmm. Oh, God, yeah. I mean, Clint Eastwood, Ron Howard, Steven Spielberg, they've been working with the same team for decades, because once you get people you can work with, you want to stay with them.
And all those people started off together.
And the funny thing is, too, one thing that just people don't understand, especially when they're coming in the industry, is it is difficult to find people you can work with. Like, really connect with, really have a second hand with. And when you find these people, you don't want to let them go. You want to hold on to them. And if you have the power to do so, especially like those guys, you can bring them along and build out. Like, I mean, I think Ron Howard won't do a movie without his first AD. Like, he just waits until he's available, and then he does a movie with him. He just won't do it without him. And same thing for DPs and art directors and production designers and all that kind of stuff. It's something that screenwriters need to understand as well. If you can build that group together, like you said earlier, if they get a job and they need to fill another seat or two in that writer's room, you're getting the first call. It's about that relationship, much more so than, at least I know I can hang with this person. He's talented. Talent is like that's the bare minimum. Like, we understand you're talented. You have to be talented. Then there's a lot of talented people. Now the next criteria is, can I sit in a room with you for 12 hours and not kill you? That's so much more valuable than having a super talented person. I would rather have someone who's a little less talented and I can actually work with than a super talented person who is impossible to work with.
Well, I have a very dear friend who's a writer and has been a writer for a long time, and she's told me, she said, she said she would rather rely on somebody on a writing staff, because they know so much more about who she is and how she can react at any given time to any different situation. I mean, sometimes you're asked, okay, guess what? We're not going to do that script that you guys put together. We're going to instead, you got to come up with a new one in the next 24 hours. I mean, if you can work with a group of people who are willing to step up to the plate and get things done, that means so much more. It's those kind of people that really, make her feel that she's got her worth and that she's got their back. If you can do that, it really helps.
Now, what are some of the common reasons scripts are rejected in Hollywood? I'm sure there's a thousand reasons, but what are some of the common ones that you're just like, oh, geez, please, why? It usually has to do with the characters, more of. I mean, it's story too, but you can. Some stories are actually, sort of things that we have seen before, but it's the characters that make it set it apart a little bit, and I think that's what people. Sometimes they say, "Oh, I wrote this romantic comedy." And I'll ask, well, what's it like? And they'll say, oh, it's like, I don't know, whatever, any Audrey Hepburn one or something like that. And then I'll look at it and I'll thought, my God, it's almost like they're copying scene for scene, except that it's not set in Rome, it's set in someplace else. You've got to still have that spark of creativity to set it apart from everything else that we are reading. The average executive and the average agent probably reads, I'd say 20, 30 scripts a week minimum. Mm-hmm. If they finish all of it. Oh, generally, isn't it true that's like you got 5 pages, 5 to 10 pages tops?
You're lucky if you have an agent that actually will read 10 or 20 pages. Occasionally, they will do that. It's really a hard business, and there is just so much coming in the doors. I've been in this industry for so long, and I just remembered I was talking to somebody who just retired as an agent, and he basically said, on an average day at our agency, we would probably get something like 70 scripts a day. some of them were, and a lot of them came from friends of friends, and some of them came from clients they already have, or from clients that are looking have had an agent but are looking for a new agent. Yeah, that's how many every single week, and they all have to read it and everything. It's just
and the funny thing is that what you just said, though, they're all referred scripts. These aren't cold scripts that just come in from Joe Blow in the middle of the street somewhere. These are actual things that they have to read because they're either coming in, they're referred for a friend of a friend or something like that. Then add that the thousands a day from unknown screenwriters who are trying to break in, if they even can get through the door.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing, this industry, but the relationships that especially if you've gone to film school or at least taken 3 or 4 film classes, those relationships are what I think really can help you, because you guys have that common sense, you have that common background and foundation, and you guys know each other. You know whether you can work together or not, and that's just so vitally important. There are a lot of agents out there who told me, when I asked, how'd you get into this agency? Oh, well, so and so and I used to go to USC together or something like that. And so it was sort of like it was more like because there was somebody they already knew.
Sure.
Or they're doing favors for somebody. That's the other thing. And it's fine if you want to do favors. I mean, I've actually had one writer that told me that she was a nanny for an actor for his kids. So, and he actually gave it to his agent to read. He did read part of it. He read the first 25 pages or so, and then he said, well, I don't have time to read the whole thing, but I do think it's a good start. I don't mind. I'll just give it to my agent. So he did. And that's how he got in to have her script read, and they did like it enough that they kept her on for a little while, but she now has kids of her own, and she's not in the industry.
So what you're saying is we should become nannies. That's the way in? Is the nannies? Is that what I'm getting from that story?
For her, at least, that it worked for that. I mean, she actually realized after a while. She was on staff on a television show for a while, and it was fine. But then she met her husband, and he just said, I have the kind of job that I have to be on call because he's a doctor, and so he said, we're either going to have to hire a nanny, or you're going to have to.
Right.
Take care of the kids or whatever. And she was fine. She was at that point, felt comfortable enough that, okay, but she is now now that her kids are older, she's now thinking about getting back into the business of writing. But then COVID hit, so I don't know what she's doing now.
That slows down things a little bit. Now, I wanted to ask you, because this is a myth that is talked about so often, is that, and a lot of newbie screenwriters think this: all I need is an agent. All I need is an agent or a manager, and all my dreams are going to come true. They're going to put me out onto the street, and I'm going to get $1 million offers and things like that. Can you please debunk the whole all I need is an agent thing, and when a writer actually needs an agent? Can you answer that for us?
There are about 10 or 20 really good screenwriting competitions where they actually have agents or studio execs or production executives who are the judges of the finals. And sometimes I've seen that sometimes the person who wins the competition doesn't end up with the agent. It's somebody who was like maybe in third place gets the agent. But there are at least 10 to 20 really, really good screenwriting competitions out there that I think people should think about. I think that's one way to kind of also get started. In fact, I would say, I know that the one that I really like a lot is the Final Draft one. Their Final Draft has their competition. And of course, most people are using Final Draft, so that's a good thing. Because what I like is the people who are the finalists, and they do it for television and they do it for features, which is nice. they not only get to have a trip to visit an agency or to visit, be introduced to some agents, they also have an opportunity to meet a lot of people in the industry because they have a big party where they're giving out awards and everything for the Final Draft Awards. And I was surprised. It's held on the Paramount lot, and I've gone a couple of times. And there are actually actors and production people, producers who work on the lot who go over there, and there's a big cocktail hour, and you can meet these people. I mean, that to me is, it's almost like if you get in and you're one of the 20 people or so that become, viable for those awards, you can meet all those people, and they'll talk to you. They're there at Paramount, and it's promoted there where, oh, here's so-and-so. You got to meet this person. They have people who are actually moving around there. They're creative execs who are helping to get those writers of the competition to meet all of these different people. And I have seen, and I've heard about all these people getting actual agents or actually getting their script to a production company for a TV show. So things like that can happen. So the competitions are a good way of getting started.
Now I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all my guests. What are 3 screenplays every screenwriter should read? My
absolute favorite screenplay ever where I read it, and I didn't want to change one word on it. Mm-hmm. It's Dog Day Afternoon.
Yeah, it's an amazing script. It's an amazing script.
Yeah. Most of them are unfortunately, most of them are dramas.
It's okay. It doesn't matter.
Well, another one, too, that I absolutely love is Network.
Yeah, that's been an answer on the show many times.
Yeah. No, Network, it really, I think what it is it's because what that guy says and he's screaming is how we've all of us have felt like that at some point.
I hate to tell you, we all feel like that right now. We're going through some stuff right now. It's amazing how accurate that thing is even today.
Let's see. I have to say there's also some musical comedies.
Sure, go ahead.
I love musicals too, so I love Grease.
Grease is fantastic. Even though they're high school students who are 35 years old. Other than that, other than the 35, I mean, literally, Stockard Channing is, I think, 32 in Grease. So it's pretty insane. But it's an amazing film. It's an amazing film. Now, what advice would you give a screenwriter wanting to break into business today?
I think it's important, if you can, to try and figure out do I know somebody from college or who's in the same neighborhood or something that you live in. Are they writers? Where can you find another writer? And if you could actually even go online. There's a lot. That's what's nice about the internet. There are so many now online writing groups. Mm-hmm. In fact, I'm going to be done. I think in another week or two, I'm supposed to be doing a little Q&A for this writing group. Mm-hmm. And it's just, if you can get together with other writers, it gives you a sense of community. And I think when you have a sense of community, you then realize you are not alone. And back in the 80s and 90s, and a little bit in the beginning of the 2000s, people tended not to want to do that because they looked at each other as competitors.
Right.
Instead of as people that they can share things with. I think it's gotten a lot better, of course, in the last 10, 15 years. And so I would strongly suggest that if you can find a group, even if it's an online one, talk with people there. They oftentimes will have people that are in the industry who, are willing to come and, do a 1-hour talk on different aspects of writing. Mm-hmm. I think joining, and the other thing too is I would also like to let people know that it's not just for people who are writing screenplays. If you have a novel, because if you have noticed around Academy Award time, most of the movies, especially for dramas, usually came from a book.
Correct.
So if you have a literary group, that's also something, that you might want to get into, especially if, start off with that. A lot of the famous writers, that's what they did. They started off with a book, and then they suddenly realized, okay, wait a minute here, I can turn this and some of the other books I have into movies. And there's a lot. I love it nowadays because with the internet, they have more places now because everything is streaming.
Yeah, absolutely. And where can people find you, your work, and your book?
Okay. Here's my book, The Script Selling Game. You can go to mwp.com, and that's my publisher's website. And I think they're still doing it. They were giving a 25% discount if you bought their book through their website. So, you want to check that out. Let's see.
And anybody looking for your consulting services?
Well, I do consulting. I also do some workshops overseas, and I don't know how far your audience goes.
Around the world.
Around the world? Okay.
Yes.
Now, with the COVID thing, of course, everything in this year has been kind of kaput. But I already have next year lined up. I will be in Ischia Island of Italy, which is off the coast of Naples.
Very difficult. Tough job. It's a very tough job, Kathie. Very tough.
I'll be teaching at a Swedish film school. I'm teaching at a school in Estonia, another one in Cologne, and another one in Warsaw, and another one in Budapest. But also, I teach on Rocaberti for the Rocaberti Retreat virtual. They have a regular Rocaberti Retreat in France, but there's also a virtual one they have. They usually have it like once a month. I don't know if they're doing it in August or not, but I'm going to be teaching a segment of it in September. And if you just go to rocabertiretreat.com and click on Rocaberti Virtual, it's like a 5-hour mini retreat. There's 4 mentors, more in different areas. One might be somebody who's a manager, somebody else might be a writer, someone else might be a production person, and someone else might specialize in books or something. I mean, they have 4 different people who are the mentors. And it's a limited enrollment. I think there's maybe 30 people on this online thing. And each of us mentors have to give a 20-minute lecture. And then we also have to read a 2-page synopsis of a fair number of the writers who
I will put that all in the I will put that all in the show notes. Kathie, thank you so much for taking the time out for coming on the show and dropping the knowledge bombs on the tribe today. So I appreciate that so much. Stay safe out there.